Serving alongside the larger Ambassador class, which it closely resembled, the Renaissance-class light cruiser was an effective and highly capable design produced in only limited numbers as part of an ultimately abortive effort to modernize Starfleet in the early years of the 24th century. Measuring in at 330 meters long, 199 meters wide, the class was armed with either phaser banks or strips, depending on when the individual ship in question was built, as well as a respectable, for the time, photon torpedo complement. Renaissance was capable of traveling at warp factor 9.2 and had a complement of between 220 and 300 officers and crew. Development on what would become the Renaissance would begin in the mid-2320s, just after Starfleet issued a series of specifications for its next generation of starships. Vessels which were intended to succeed the ships of the Excelsior generation in production. Issued in 2324, the specifications expressed the need for several types of ships to fulfill various intended roles, completely replacing existing production of existing classes with new designs that would incorporate new technologies. Given how delay-plagued the development of Excelsior had been, Starfleet took the atypical approach of developing smaller vessels which would develop and test new technologies prior to their inclusion in the flagship class. The proposed light cruiser and a torpedo-focused escort vessels would be selected for development first. From these early designs, the Renaissance and Wambundu classes would emerge in short order, after comparatively brief development cycles for the time. Renaissance would indeed be considered such a successful design that the team which developed her would be assigned to also design the new heavy cruiser, basing their new design heavily on the bones of the smaller Renaissance class. Despite its size, the designers were able to cram a great deal of capability into a small package, creating a ship which possessed capabilities on par with the older Excelsior class in its original form, but with significantly higher speed and endurance and greater crew comfort. A prototype was prepared and launched in 2327 for extensive testing. The first Renaissance-class light cruisers began entering service in 2329. Early opinion on the design would be mixed, with those who operated the ships finding them to be handy, reliable, and responsive, while also being significantly more habitable than the broadly similar Excelsior class, which had begun in this period to be downrated to light cruisers. But on the other hand, those responsible for providing resources to Starfleet for the construction of new vessels found these new cruisers to be less than alluring. In their eyes, the ships represented only marginal improvements in capability versus the Excelsior class, but because they would have to be ordered and built new, whereas Excelsior was already in service, it meant that there was actually little reason, in their eyes, to build them. Between these two conflicting viewpoints, the opinion of those who ordered the ships and were those responsible for resource allocation, won out, leading to only a relative handful of Renaissance-class vessels being constructed, though the class would be built in a number of variants, with the second major revision to the ship introducing phaser strips to the fleet prior to the inclusion of that technology into the larger Ambassador class. The relative handful of Renaissance class which were built would give good service alongside the Excelsiors, which had taken their jobs that they were intended to take from Excelsior, in something of a running trend for Starfleet in the period. Appointments to the class would be considered plum assignments by many, with the ship's spacious accommodation being considered a major reason to seek appointment aboard one. The class would be heavily involved in the frequent skirmishes along the Cardassian border in the 2350s, though most members of the class were undergoing refits in the early 2360s, so would miss out in the climactic final battles of the border wars. Renaissance-class ships would be heavily engaged during the Dominion War, being used most often as vanguard units in fleet formations, waiting in the wings to reinforce and lend support as needed. The class would also be used frequently as convoy escorts, leading formations of smaller escort vessels in defense of merchants against Dominion raiding parties, which frequently penetrated deeply into Federation space. More than half of the class would be lost in the course of the war, with the survivors quickly assigned to various secondary duties and placed in reserve during the remainder of the 2370s, as Starfleet sought to downsize its fleet size and consolidate how many classes it had in service. The final member of the class to see active service would be the USS Belle Epoque, which was assigned out of reserves in 2378 to replace the aging USS Ranger, a Constitution-class starship, as the school ship for the San Francisco Starfleet Academy campus. She would be relieved in this role once a new, dedicated vessel arrived in 2384 and was scrapped. It could be easy to see the Renaissance class as a failed design, given its limited production numbers and brief service life. But this judgment ignores the context of the time of its design, which makes it clear that the chips were very much stacked against the class. Regardless of how capable the ship was in service, and as it turned out the class was very capable when new, she was just never destined to see widespread adoption, given when she entered service. Nonetheless, Renaissance is a very capable design of the early half of the 24th century, and should not be forgotten. Thank you very much for watching. I had originally intended to make this a Dominion attack ship video, but then it occurred to me that I have, I have the artwork for this video done and ready to go. As well, I also had Dominion attack ship artwork, but I'm also working on artwork for the Challenger class, and I was going to do the Challenger class next, and I had forgotten about the Renaissance class, and then I thought, well, I don't want to do Dominion attack ship and then Starfleet ship back to back, because I'm trying to branch out from just doing pure Star Trek Starfleet ships. So I thought I'll put the Dominion attack ship in the middle of those two to kind of space things out a little bit better, hopefully. So yeah, you got this lovely video instead. Also, you may have, if you have decent headphones, you may hear peacocks and chickens in the background, and that's because there's distant thunder, like miles and miles away. There's a whole lot of Mississippis between me and the thunder. If you're American, you'll get that. Yeah, that just means that they randomly freak out because they hear noises and it scares them. So hopefully audio settings are low enough that you don't constantly hear the birds. But at the same time, I'm working all week, and this is the only time I have to record a video, so this was kind of going to happen either way. And there's really nothing I can do about it, so deal with it. Or log off and don't watch the video. I guess you can do that too. I don't know. I guess. Anyway, I'm going to shut up now that I've gone on yet again about... Oh, also, you may have heard Frances, the cat, that little jingle. She's fine if we're in different rooms and nobody's saying anything, but as soon as I start talking, if she's not in that room, she freaks out. So she's been in the room happy as a clam, except when she scratches. And then you hear her little bell. So maybe I'll have to find a work on of that if a bunch of people say it was an issue. So let me know if you heard the birds or the cat. That's a different talk from the birds and the bees.